give generous Christmas gifts to her grandchildren. Her grandchildren, however, have never responded with even so much as a thank you note, even though they have been encouraged by their parents to do so. This year, as usual, Helen sent each of them a check for $100. Only this time, the kids all came over to her house, personally gave her a thank you hug. When Helen shared this with a friend of hers, the friend remarked, "What made things so different this year from last?" "Oh," she says, "that's easy. This year I didn't sign the checks." During the church Christmas play, little Stevie forgot his line. His mother, who was sitting in the front pew, was mouthing the words, but it didn't help. Finally, she whispered under her breath, "I am the light of the world." Stevie stood up tall and proud and said with great feeling, "My mother is the light of the world." On Christmas, we celebrate. Jesus the Christ, the elder brother, master teacher, is born. Jesus, the great liberator of humankind, who freed us from the old law, the bondage of belief in an angry, punishing God, and eye for an eye morality, who came to show all people that God is not a capricious, human-like figure, but unchanging principle, not just good, but goodness itself, not just loving, but love itself. In the way he lived his life, Jesus demonstrated that anything is possible through the power of God, that miracles happen when we are consciously connected and attuned to the source of all that is. The Christmas season invites us all, whether young, old, or somewhere in between, to get in touch with our childlike hearts, to let go of our anxiety and need for control, and simply allow God to be God in us. Is there a more delightful sound than children laughing? So free and light and unself-conscious. Children seem to just naturally know about joy. They live fully in the present moment and take miracles for granted. They see the funny and absurd in everything and are usually not afraid to say what they see. The view of the world, their view of the world, is simple and straightforward. At Christmas time, kids are happy and excited, while we grown-ups are often tired and testy. Joseph was no exception. On the first Christmas Eve, he arrived in Bethlehem exhausted and kind of grouchy after the long trek from Nazareth. He was desperate to find lodging for himself and Mary, so he knocked on the door of the very first inn he came to, and the innkeeper answered, said, "Please, kind sir, give us a room. My wife is expecting a baby at any moment." The callous innkeeper said, "That's not my fault." And Joseph replied, "Yeah, I know, it's not mine either." Anyway, sorry. So if you've been too busy or stressed, how about taking a nice deep breath right now and just relax. For the next 3/4 of an hour or so, let's give ourselves permission to see through childlike eyes. Perhaps as we prepare to travel or spend quality time with family, Amy, we can use this moment to make a conscious decision to let little annoying things roll off and focus on the fun of it all. Perhaps we'll remember how much it helps to have a sense of humor. William Blake, the great poet and mystic, writes about something he calls organized innocence. He says that childlike innocence is an energy that the universe responds to. He says innocence is the embodiment of open-mindedness, emotional honesty, and the expectation of good. I believe, as Blake did, that there is joy in heaven when one of us grown-ups who has lost our innocence and joy because life has simply gotten too difficult finds them again. The Christmas story is timeless and beautiful. A young girl is visited by an angel who tells her that she is to be the mother of the one who will save the world from darkness. She doesn't understand. How could she? I think she was 14. She is awed and overwhelmed, and yet she agrees with a pure heart in obedience and humility. An older man faces the gossip and disapproval of the town and asks the pregnant girl to marry him. He too has been visited by an angelic messenger and given instruction. He doesn't understand either, but his faith gives him strength and courage, and so he too says yes and takes on the role of husband and protector. Obedient to civil law, the young couple travels to the county seat to be counted in the census. There in Bethlehem, Jesus is born, not in a palace, but in a stable. A bright star in the eastern sky bears witness to the child's birth and guides 3 wealthy merchants to the little town and that lowly stable. Though they are thought of as kings themselves, they bow down before the tiny infant in the manger and lay priceless gifts before him. These 3 truly are wise men. They have been instructed to return to King Herod in Jerusalem and tell him where the child is. Herod has told them that he too wants to worship the child. But intuition tells them this is not true. And so they choose to disobey the voice of worldly power and obey their inner authority. They return to the east by a different route. And if they had not done so, perhaps our story would have had a very different ending. What a story of faith and strength and spiritual awakening. But you know what? It's even more incredible when understood metaphysically. All the characters represent aspects of our consciousness. Jesus is our intellect, Joseph is our intellect, which, when led by faith, grows into wisdom. Mary is our heart, our intuitive nature, which, when spiritually grounded, perceives truth which is beyond the appearance of things. The Christ child represents our limitless potential, that which is most beautiful and real within us, the deepest desire of our heart. The birth of the Christ child represents our awakening to that which is highest and best in every one of us. The Christ child within us is eternally young. It is tender and vulnerable because it is uncomplicated and wide open to life. This vulnerability is truly our greatest strength, because the real danger we all face is that we could live our whole lives defending ourselves from perceived threats and never know true joy. We could die without ever expressing our gifts and talents, and that would be a great tragedy. Our inner Christ child rejoices in the truth. It urges us to be simple of spirit and to trust our source. Seems this is not an easy thing for the adult mind to do. It almost seems unrealistic. And yet, it is our calling, and it is our inheritance. Then there are these 3 wise men. Seems to me they were wise in some ways, but not in others. They came bearing gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Lovely. But if those wise men had been wise women, they would have arrived on time, brought really useful gifts, helped deliver the baby, cleaned the stable, baked a casserole, and babysat so Mary and Joseph could have some time alone together. But really, metaphysically, the wise men stand for divine ideas. They came from the East, which represents the inner world. Precious gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh symbolize mind, body, and spirit. The wise men arrive at the place where the baby Christ resides, in the heart. When we spend time in the stillness of the inner world, we are likely to receive divine ideas and greater spiritual understanding. And we are made in such a way that when this happens, our mind, body, and spirit work together to show us connections between our past and the present, between our external and inner experiences, between our old ideas and our new awareness. These connections are pure gold, for they are what enable us to integrate new insights and be transformed by them. The new mind, the spiritualized mind, working in harmony with the body and the spirit, will always tell us to follow our inner authority. And when we do, we will most certainly make different choices than the world sees as practical or strategic. I suppose this means that when we make choices that are spirit-led and intuitively guided, we might as well give up expecting the world's understanding or approval. It is not likely to happen because the ego cannot understand what the intuition sees perfectly. Now remember, it was the star that led the wise men to the Holy Family. The symbolism of the star contains the central message of the whole Christmas story. The star represents spiritual clarity and brightness of spirit. For me, there is no better example of this than a little girl named Emma, who is cast in the role of the Star of Bethlehem in the church Christmas pageant. Her mother is pretty disappointed because Emma has no lines to speak. But after the first dress rehearsal, Emma burst through the front door of the house wearing her costume, a 5-pointed gold star draped over her like a sandwich board, adorned with lots and lots of shiny tinsel. Well, but what exactly will you be doing in the play, the mother asked. Standing tall with her head erect, Emma replies, I just stand there and shine. Just stand there and shine. Was there ever a better statement about somebody who knows who they really are? As adults who have lived a lot and seen a lot and experienced a lot of disappointment and loss, being childlike may seem like a pipe dream. Yet, the Christmas story speaks directly to our careworn hearts and challenges us to polish up that tarnished star inside of us and come back to life, to find within ourselves the resilience to cast off past disappointments and call forth that holy child who is alive and well and waiting in the center of our being. Childlike innocence would really help us grown-ups through tough situations. I'm thinking about my friend Mike, a successful businessman who was eager to get home after a stressful week of negotiations. Well, Mike arrived at the airport feeling tired and overwhelmed. On top of this, he was late and worried that he might miss his flight. He arrived only to find the airport absolutely jammed with hundreds of other anxious travelers. See if you identify. The stress he was feeling colored every experience. The red and green Christmas decorations in the terminal looked garish and tacky to him. The overplayed Christmas carols blaring from the loudspeakers just irritated him further. The luggage lines were long and slow. The air was hot and stuffy. People were sneezing and coughing all around him. Oh, great, he thought. Now I'll probably get sick too. So by the time he got to the counter, he was in a pretty bad mood. He was gruff with the ticket agent and did not even acknowledge her cheerful Merry Christmas greeting. Then he noticed the mistletoe hanging from the low ceiling. Not really mistletoe, mind you, but that cheap plastic stuff they sell in the dollar store. With annoyance, he said to the agent, "Even if we were married, I would not want to kiss you under that gross mockery of mistletoe." And the angel replied, "Sir, look more close." I mean, the agent, not the angel, but she was an angel. So she replies, "Sir, look more closely to where the mistletoe is hanging." Mike said, "I see, it's right above the luggage scale. Guess you'd have to step on the scale for me to give you a kiss, and I'm sure you don't want to do that." Still, the ticket agent held on to her smile. "That's not why it's there," she said. "Okay, I give up," grouchy Mike said. "Why is it there?" Well, the agent just smiled sweetly and said, "It's there to remind you to kiss your luggage goodbye." Startled, Mike finally looked at the woman in the face and noticed the twinkle in her eye. Finally, his lip began to twitch a little, and a smile slowly broke out on his face and on hers too. And right there, in the midst of the chaos, these two strangers shared a hearty laugh. And instantly, some of the stress melted away. The ticket agent was like 5-year-old Amy in a way. On Christmas Day, she unwrapped a beautiful golden-haired doll that her grandmother had given her. And she squealed with delight, "It's so beautiful, Grandma." And she played with that new doll for hours until the end of the day. She put it down and she picked up her old dolly in her arms. And this baby was no longer beautiful. It had lost most of its hair and one of its eyes. "Well, well," smiled Grandma, "it looks like you still love your old baby the best." "I love the beautiful doll you gave me," she said, "but I have loved this old one for such a long time. And besides, if I didn't love her, who would?" So, okay, we've talked about Stevie and Emmy, Emma, and Amy, all great kids. But it just wouldn't be Christmas if I didn't tell you about 4-year-old Alice. She was my favorite Christ child, and I think I tell you this every year. So it's Christmas time, and Alice has a bad cold. She's had to stay in bed for 2 days, and now her mother has taken her to the pediatrician, something she dislikes a lot. As the kind doctor looks into her ears with an otoscope, he asks, "Do you think I'll find Big Bird in there?" The little girl is sullen and silent. Next, the doc takes a tongue depressor and looks down her throat, and he asks, "Do you think I'll find the Cookie Monster down there?" Again, the little girl is silent. Then the doctor puts a stethoscope to her chest. As he listens to her heart, he asks, "Do you think I'll find Barney in there?" "Oh, no," the little girl replies with a bright smile. "Jesus is in my heart. Barney is on my underpants." So I wish you all a Merry Christmas. May you be generous like Helen, innocent like Stevie, sparkly like Emma, compassionate like Amy, and wise like Alice. And may you be fortunate enough to be like Mike and encounter a lovely stranger who wakes you up and makes you laugh. God bless you all. Merry Christmas. And now I invite you to a time of meditation and reflection. Just settle back in your seat, take a deep breath, and allow your body to relax. Breathe. Breathe into the center of your being where there is order and peace. Truly, I say to you, whosoever does not come to the kingdom of God as a little child shall not enter in. During this quiet time, I invite you to let go of all that you think you know and all that you think you are and all the chores that you think must be done. And go within and connect with your God in faith and humility. For just a few moments, let's just give it up. Let's just give up our worrying and our questioning and our planning and accept life just as it is and other people just as they are and ourselves just the way we are. Let us simply breathe. That's better. Now in this moment of peace, simply decide to lay down whatever burden you are carrying. Imagine that you are a little child snuggled up in the arms of the loving Father, safe and protected. God is life. God is all that is good, all that is love. The life we are living is infused with divine order and wisdom. And we are invited to simply let go and lean into it. To trust our own lives. And most of all, to love ourselves unconditionally. No matter what. As we enter into a longer time of silence, we affirm, God and I are one and all is well. God and I are one and all is well. In the silence. manifesting as perfect order within and beneath all things. I now place my loneliness with you. I place my worries with you. And my grief with you. And all of my loved ones with you. I release them and let them all go.